But today is a different story. Failure to qualify at Indy, coupled with a change in chassis, leaves Rahal with an uphill battle to defend his title. Indy 500 Rookie of the Year, the reigning Formula One champion Nigel Mansell, has the points lead. Nigel's IndyCar debut in Australia left the fans cheering and his competitors worried about his hard style of driving and reckless abandon. He won from the pole at Australia, but Nigel's first drive on an oval was not as pleasant. This crash during practice left him sidelined for the Phoenix race. A third-place finish at Long Beach and at Indy secured his spot at the top of the IndyCar fight. Nigel's teammate Mario Andretti is off to his best season in 10 years. A fourth at Australia and a win at Phoenix catapulted Mario toward the top of the points. But a failed engine in Long Beach and tire problems at Indy have dropped him to second in the points. Replacing three-time champion Rick Mears is not the easiest of tasks. But there is one man who has the talent. It's Paul Tracy. Last year, he showed the skill and aggressiveness needed for greatness, but also an inability to keep the car off of the guardrails. This year, after lapping the field twice at Phoenix, the young Canadian again found the wall. But Tracy persevered through, claiming his first IndyCar victory at Long Beach, despite 2 extra pit stops for damaged tires. Tracy's good fortune did not last, as he found the wall again, this time at Indianapolis. Emerson Fittipaldi is another champion in the hunt for the PPG Cup. After a second at Australia, Emo suffered a crash while leading at Phoenix. Long Beach was disappointing too, but he made up for it by outboxing Nigel Mansell on a late race restart at the Indy 500, winning his second and Roger Penske's 9th race at the Brickyard. Indy is over, and the focus now is the PPG Cup and the championship of the Indy cars. We're at Wisconsin's State Fair Park, the historic Milwaukee Mile, for the Miller Genuine Draft 200. Hello, I'm Paul Page. We've just come off a wonderfully safe Indianapolis 500. And because it was so safe, there was a good list of cars entered for this race here today, and 25 are ready to start, led by Emerson Fittipaldi, the defending 500 champion. But this race, too, is a historic event. There's always some major occurrence that sets this race apart. For example, the very first win by a rear-engine car came here at the hands of Jimmy Clark. And this race today is reflecting the changing face of IndyCar racing. Only 9 of the starters in the field today drove this race last year. Part of that owing to the fact that there were so many injuries in last year's Indianapolis 500. But a further reflection of the changing face is the presence of Raul Boesel, who by 5 miles an hour is faster than anyone else in qualifying and sits on the pole. Here's Jack Arute.
And, Paul, he brings a lot of emotion from the Indianapolis 500 where, Raul, you said you were the winner. How important was that when you qualified here? Did you think about that a lot?
Well, this is very important to bring back, the determination of the team, to put back the good spirits, to give a motivation for myself, for the whole team. Was a hard hit what happened to us in Indianapolis, but I'm glad that we, stay together, get together, put everything together, and, my first pole cannot be, the best time.
When does that become old news? When do you stop thinking about the Indy 500?
Well, it's very hard to stop thinking because every single person that come talk with me say, oh, you should won that race, they took away from you, and, I cannot believe how much support I have from the public, and that's great.
Well, good luck to you today. Another story that came out of the Indianapolis 500 is going to be talked about by my colleague, Gary Gerald. Gary?
Jack, we're back here inside row number 4. The PPG IndyCar points leader, Nigel Mansell, the reigning World Formula One champion, being snugged down into the cockpit. Nigel will try to get a quick word here as they continue to make the final adjustments. You make the transition from the big oval at Indianapolis now to this very hectic short oval for the first time. Is that a difficult transition for you?
Yeah, I'd say it is actually, because this is so different to what Indianapolis was, and I think the biggest thing here as well, the track is very, very bumpy, so you've got to trust your car in the turns more so than what you had on the super speedway. It's just been a then everything happens a little bit quicker here.
Nigel says it's still tough getting used to turning left, particularly after last week at Indianapolis, now again for 200 miles here at Milwaukee. Let's go back up to Paul Page.
So Nigel and the rest are ready. Their car's silent for the moment out on the main straightaway. Let's take the time to look at the starting grid. On the pole, Raul Boesel, who led the opening laps at Indy last week and finished fourth. This is his first career pole. Alongside is Emerson Fittipaldi, fresh off that Indy victory. He's looking for his first win at Milwaukee. In row 2, it's Scott Goodyear, the Canadian driver who won his first IndyCar pole at Phoenix in April. Alongside is Paul Tracy, who won at Long Beach and now looks for his first oval win. Row number 3 to the inside, Mario Andretti has 6 career poles and 4 wins here on the Milwaukee Mile. Alongside is Scott Brayton, who had his best ever finish at this track last year when he finished 3rd. Nigel Mansell is inside row 4, looking for his first oval win. And Robbie Gordon starts alongside, an impressive newcomer driving for A.J. Foyt. In the 5th row, it's Bobby Rahal, the defending PPG Cup champion, looking for a rebound here with a new Lola. And Roberto Guerrero, the pole winner here in 1987. Row 6, Stefan Johansson scored a 3rd in his IndyCar debut last year in Detroit. And Adrian Fernandez, the Indy Lights Rookie of the Year last year. In row 7, Jimmy Vasser in his 2nd IndyCar season. And Teo Fabi, the pole winner here in 1983. In row 8, Olivier Griard, a former Formula One driver in his first IndyCar race. And Mike Groff, he won the Indy Lights title in '89. This is his first race for Rahal Hogan Racing. The 9th row, Danny Sullivan with 16 career wins, but he's never won here. And Al Unser Jr., his first oval win came here in 1990. Row 10, David Coudray, the Indy Lights veteran in his first season of the IndyCars. And Buddy Lazier. In row 11, it's Willie T. Ribbs and Arie Luyendyk. All 3 of his IndyCar wins have come on an oval. Row 12, Ross Bentley and Hiro Matsushita. And alone in the 13th row is Robbie Buell, the 92 Indy Lights champion. And try this on for size. Only 10 of the 25 drivers in the starting grid are American-born. You want some popcorn, a little refreshment? There's plenty here at the State Fairgrounds. Emerson Fittipaldi in a true racer's run. Emo took his 2nd Indianapolis win 1 week ago. Let's go back that week and savor Emo's moment.
And Emerson Fittipaldi making the final adjustments on his safety straps, his helmet on. He's awaiting the command to start engines. Emerson, now 7 days later, the Indianapolis 500. What effect has it had upon your life this week?
Well, it's incredible, Jack. I mean, I've been going everywhere, all over the place, and but it's great to be back in racing, to focus in Milwaukee. That's another race for the championship, and you know, I have to try harder here, but that's fantastic to Indianapolis.
Paul, a lot of people forget that it's very difficult the following week because there's so many public appearances. Fittipaldi didn't arrive to the racetrack until 15 minutes before the first practice session on Friday.
Fittipaldi and the rest, Sam Posey. The focus now changes to the championship itself.
Yes, and with 4 different winners in the first 4 races, that championship battle looks very tight indeed. Yet on closer inspection, it may very well be that Nigel Mansell is in the process of running away with it. He's only been in 3 of the 4 races, and yet he has a 7-point championship lead. After the race today, the next 4 races will all be on road courses at which he excels. His only perceived weakness coming into the season was his inexperience on ovals. And yet last week on the oval at Indianapolis, he finished a brilliant 3rd. I would say if he finishes in the top 4 today, he will leave here with a stranglehold on the championship.
And then there's Bobby Rahal, the defending champion. If he wants to repeat, he has a long way to go. Here's Gary Gerald.
Paul, no question, it's bounce-back time right now for Bobby Rahal. He starts today back here inside of the row 5. All of this after the bitter disappointment of the month of May and being bumped out of the Indy 500. They've put the Rahal-Hogan chassis project on hold. They took delivery of a Lola on Monday. This crew worked virtually around the clock this week to have the car race ready. Rahal on the track for the first time Friday afternoon. Bobby says his confidence is back. The crew's rejuvenated. He says he feels 10 years younger. And right now they're ready to get back in this championship hunt. Keep in mind, they dominated the mile ovals last year, winning 3 of 4. The one they didn't win, they were second here at Milwaukee. Paul?
The good news about this track, Bobby Unser, is that it's a driver's track.
Well, Paul, the Milwaukee Mile is banked only 9 degrees. Now, for a driver, that's a flat track, and it's also extremely rough. Now, the good news is it's very wide, a perfect oval with long turns, and the drivers can take several different lines through the turns, and passing can happen almost any place, often even 3 abreast in the turns. And because of this, handling and driver ability are far more important here than almost any other track that I know of. In fact, Milwaukee is known as being a driver's racetrack. And I promise you, today is going to be one heck of a good race.
For the moment, they sit silent, but when we come back, we'll have the start of the engines on the Milwaukee Mile. 25-car field. The stillness is about to be broken.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
And this is what it looks like as the engine starts here at Milwaukee. Bobby Rahal, his new car sits ready. The rest of the field all comes to life. Each crew indicating that their car is ready to go. Danny Sullivan, tremendous onboard camera shot. As we flip through some of the onboard cameras we have for you for this 200-mile run at Milwaukee. Al Unser Jr. well back in the field. Both he and his teammate did not qualify well. And Raul Boisel, the pole sitter, his first pole. Still much anger from last week and the penalties that he was assessed, 2 different penalties that Raul feels cost him the Indianapolis 500. Maybe he'll make good for that anger today. An 8-year history in the IndyCars, tremendous driver, finally coming into his own. As this year already we have seen 2 new winners on the charts, Nigel Mansell and Paul Tracy. The front row begins to roll away. Now the rest of the field starting their rollout. 2 parade laps and a pace lap, and we'll be racing here at Milwaukee. The race record is held by Michael Andretti. He, of course, is not here in Formula One today. The real key there is the fuel stop expectations, but Bobby Unser has already calculated you need to get to the 66th lap for the first stop if you'd like to make this a 2-stop race. Now let's take a look at the starting field, and look at this. The first row, all Brazilian. The second row, all Canadian, as we flip down through the remainder of this starting field on a beautiful day here in Milwaukee. The field all set and ready to go. No indication of any problems with any drivers on the start. All engines started on time. Missing from this field, though, you may have noticed that Lynn St. James is not here. Apparently not enough money to come to this race and complete her commitment, which was originally intended to be for an entire season. So now behind those pace cars and safety cars, the field begins to warm the tires, though that shouldn't be a serious consideration here today because it's a nice warm day. Let's go to Gary Gerald.
Tires, however, Paul, will be a focus of a lot of attention in the pits because, as you well know, this aging surface here at Milwaukee is the most abrasive racetrack that the Indy cars compete on, and because of that, the tires wear out quicker than they normally would. The tire wear is usually gone by after 50 laps. The pit stop window is longer than that. The right front and the right rear are the critical sides that all these crews are going to be monitoring. Let's go further on the pit road and Jack.
And Gary, you talked about that pit stop window, and Paul, you alluded to the fact that it should be about lap 68. Fuel is always a question on a 1 mile oval. Not running out of fuel, being able to manage it in a proper way so that you can make this race on only 2 stops. Conventional wisdom is to win, you need to stop only twice. But talking to a lot of the front runners earlier today, they're beginning to feel that if there's a lot of cautions, they'd rather play it closer to the vest and make it 3 stops. Track positioning so very important here at Milwaukee. We'll only have to wait and see whether it's a 2-stop race or a 3-stop event.
And the action on these miles comes fast and furious. Look at the men who have won their very first race here at this track, including Rick Mears, Jimmy Clark, the first rear engine win. This track stretches back to 1904. It was dirt in its early years, paved in 1954. A tremendous facility, and a long list of drivers, including Al Unser Jr. and Mario Andretti, scored their first oval win on this track. You're on board now with Nigel Mansell as we take again a look at some of the onboard cameras, and look at that crowd. It's a sellout here at Wisconsin State Fair Park. Looking backwards now from Ari Leyendijk's car, the pole sitter at Indy. Further back in the field here at Milwaukee, Al Unser Jr. well back in the field alongside of his teammate Danny Sullivan. Gigantic crowd. Look at this shot for Danny Sullivan. That's going to tell you something about who's moving on him. So we expect a wonderful day, especially with those pretty blue skies overhead. The field now beginning to form up as they head through the first turn, and look how flat this track is, but it's nice and wide, plenty of room to maneuver both on the track and in the pit area. The crews all now moving back away from the wall as they are ready to go racing. And Raul Boesel running very, very slow. Already some tactics beginning to play here on the start. Fittipaldi alongside, but Boesel really has taken the field down. Now he begins to pick the pace up as the pace car is clear in front of him. Fittipaldi follows alongside the front row, a little strained as they come toward the green flag. We'll keep an eye on the starter and see whether or not they decide to give it the green flag. Boesel was leading the field. No, they say no. Yellow flag. Lap will count. But they will not give that field a start because Raul was so far out in front and Fittipaldi was lagging.
That was just too much of a jump that he got, Paul. We can see that happening clear back on the back straightaway. Now, he'll only get a couple of tries at this. And now remember, the big penalty, though, is that everybody is using up fuel, precious fuel. And that's going to hurt him more than anything.
Bobby, I'm sure that he was remembering the way Emerson got the edge on the starts at Indianapolis a week ago and didn't want to let that happen again.
It's true, Sam, but boy, I'll tell you what, that was a big one that he was trying to get right there.
Wally Dallenbach, the chief steward, and Jim Swintow, the chief starter here, took a look at the field, didn't like its alignment. Will they like it this time? As up through the gears goes Raul Boesel. You saw a quick little twitch at the back end of the car as he started up through the gears. Now they look at the green flag again, and this time it's going to count as the field streams into one. And Raul's objective is accomplished as he moves to the front of the field and takes the lead. The Penske cars, Fittipaldi and Tracy battle back, but here comes Scott Goodyear moving to the outside while Mario moves down to the inside. Now Robbie Gordon on the charge. And Raul leads lap number 1 and does it easily. Across the line, Boesel, followed by Fittipaldi, then Scott Goodyear, then Robbie Gordon, then Paul Tracy, then Mario Andretti. Running alone in front, completing his second lap now, is Raul Boesel. He was so angry after the Indianapolis 500 last week. And now he wants to prove to everybody he's definitely a winner. And he could have beaten this man, Emerson Fittipaldi, at Indy.
You're seeing a guy out in front, Boesel, and a guy right there. Two of the guys that have more determination than any drivers I've seen for a long time. They're two stubborn human beings. Now, Boesel, leading the race right there, has really got an axe to grind. He's really mad at the racing world because they think, Paul, that they've treated him wrong in the penalties that he got at Indianapolis.
Scott Goodyear runs in third place, but closing on him quickly is Robbie Gordon, A.J. Foyt's young student. Goodyear won the Michigan 500 last year, scored his first pole at Phoenix this year, so he can handle the ovals and handle a mile. But so can Gordon, who is really showing his stuff this season. And the battle behind them as well, Mario Andretti and Paul Tracy. That is a fight for 5th place.
Tracy must drive a race which does not see him going into the wall. Paul Tracy is a marked man in the sense he's made several mistakes this year, and he can't make one today.
Nigel Mansell is in 7th place. Scott Brayton is 8th. 9th is Stefan Johansson. And 10th is Bobby Rahal. On board, Nigel Mansell, 7th place. Just ahead of him is Paul Tracy, and then Mario will ride and watch.
You can see the different grooves now that we're on board camera, Paul, as the guys go through the turns. You can see Nigel there Nigel doesn't have as much experience on ovals. So you can see, as we have the onboard camera with him, that he has a little bit different groove than the other guys do.
Not unlike Indy, Bobby, where he watched.
Car spinning. We saw a quick glimpse of somebody going sideways.
Oh.
Caught it on the onboard camera. And as they come around again, I'm sure we'll see it again. There it is, Stefan Johansson.
There's another guy without an awful lot of oval track experience, but a very good race driver driving for Tony Bettenhausen.
So the yellow is out, and very quickly, Stefan Johansson's day is over. He started just a year ago at Detroit, finished 3rd there. The leader, of course, is Raul Boesel at this moment. Last year, he started 11th and finished 10th here. It looks like this might hold a much better result. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC station. Back at the Milwalkee Mile, West Dallas, Wisconsin, the state fairgrounds. We are under caution, our first of the day. The yellow came out when Stefan Johansson, driving in his first race here at Milwaukee, lost the back end and slid up against the wall. Raul Boesel jumped on the start, got a good start when the green flag finally came out on the second attempt at starting here, and got ahead of Emerson Fittipaldi. There you see Emerson, there's Scott Goodyear, and this is the way they will line up, coming back to the green flag as soon as they clear the situation out in turn number 2 where Johansson got against the wall.
Well, Paul, he got into the wall coming off of turn 2. Again, Milwaukee's very flat. It's a very, very much of a handling racetrack, and it just looks like Stefan's rear end just got a little bit loose on the car and it came around, but it doesn't look like it was a real bad wreck. Unfortunately, he's a good driver and he's out of the race. You can see the rear tires on the car, how they contacted the wall and got bent out of shape a little bit.
He was out of the car, looking fine, leaning back against the wall, chatting with the course workers a few moments ago.
All right, they have the car up on the hook now. You remember Jack Arute mentioned that tires are key here. The selection of a racing tire is not limited to rain tires or slicks. Jack Arute takes it to look at the difference between scuffed and sticker.
All the racing tires that come from the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company are hand-built in their racing factory in Akron, Ohio. Now, once they're mounted on an IndyCar wheel, they still retain the manufacturer's sticker. That's why new tires, brand new tires, are called sticker tires. But teams throughout the course of practice sessions will scuff tires in, putting 3 to 5 laps on them. Now, why do they do that? One, they want to bring the tire up to full racing temperature to check the air pressure and allow the tire to cure and also create a footprint matched to the racetrack. Now, during the course of the race, they'll use these scuffs, but at Indianapolis, we saw some teams elect to go with brand new sticker tires. And here's why. The scuff tires that they had on hand were not performing well. They weren't getting the handling characteristics that were necessary for the ever-changing track conditions. So teams went with the stickers and rolled the dice in hopes that a sticker tire would perform better than the scuff tire.
Still clearing the situation over in turn 2 where Stefan Johansson's car got against the wall. His car owner, Tony Bettenhausen, is now with Gary Gerald.
Unfortunately, Tony, Long Beach, it was before really the start of the race, and here you barely get into it. And did you have a chance to talk to your driver at all when he got out of the car?
No, he called in his own yellow, though. You know, I heard him about the time we saw the yellow flag waved. We heard him say yellow, and he got out of the car apparently right at that time, so we don't know if it just got away from him coming off a 2 or what happened for sure.
I know there must be a lot of anxieties. Last week you're driving the car at Indianapolis. This week you're back on the roll as car owner. You've only got 1 week before Detroit to make any necessary repairs. This is not an easy life being an owner or a driver, is it?
No, it's not. It's a little bit easier now when you're not having to have to worry about doing two things at one time. But, you know, we ran third last year at Detroit, and we're going to be back with the MX Penske there, and we got another car. We'll be fine.
We look forward to it. Thank you, Tony. Paul?
13 laps are now complete. We are still under yellow with Raul Boesel is leading Emerson Fittipaldi. We'll come back for the green flag, the restart here at the Milwaukee Mile right after this. We're back at the Milwaukee Mile. Next Saturday on ABC Sports, it's the Pro Bowlers Tour rolling into Washington for the Seattle Open. Then on ABC's Wide World of Sports, top gymnasts go for the gold. It's the men's all-around final of the World Gymnastics Championships. Plus, the Advil Mini Marathon from New York City. And hold on to your handlebars as mountain biking goes extreme. That's all coming up next Saturday. Let's get an update on our current situation under caution. Here's Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, Stefan Johansson has made his way back to the CART Medical Center, headed by Dr. Terry Trammell. Just moments ago, I talked to Dr. Trammell. He said that Stefan Johansson is suffering from a bruised left knee. Not a big problem, but remember, Paul, that in testing in Phoenix, Stefan Johansson also had a problem where he hurt a couple of vertebrae in his back. So this guy's been banged up since the beginning of the season. Let's check in with Gary Gerald. Gary?
Jack, we're in the Nigel Mansell pit now. We checked with the crew. Nigel indicated the car a little bit loose, but he also said in the radio that he's not really hanging the car out here in the early going. Remember, this is his first time in competition on a 1-mile oval. He missed that adventure down at Phoenix because of a practice day crash. So it's a whole new experience from the big oval at Indy last week to this very hectic, very bumpy surface here at Milwaukee. Right now the car a little loose. They say he can live with it, however.
Mansell runs in 7th place at the moment. We're still under caution, though the indication is that yellow flag will disappear in just 1 lap. And again, Raul Boesel really slowing the car down. Bobby Unser, what is he thinking about?
Well, he's going a little bit too slow. You got to remember a couple of things. One of the things important is he's never been in front of a race before, as far as starting in the front. And the race is just brand new. He's never led a race. So he's doing something. He's trying to get away from the pace car to get a run so Emmo doesn't get a shot at him at the lead. But he's going too far with it.
See the black car in the center of your screen? That's Robbie Gordon. He was 8th on the grid. He's running 4th now. He has improved dramatically in the few laps this race has been going on.
Well, remember his run all the way from the back of the field on the mile at Phoenix.
Yes.
He was up contesting with the leaders within a very few laps. And now everyone concerned about the slow pace being set by Boesel is moving back and forth trying to get their tires up to speed. Raul Boesel's tremendous drive at Indianapolis has brought the Brazilian the praise and admiration of many and helped him make a name for himself.
I always be on the shadow of the big names, of the big Brazilian drivers, you know, Emerson, Piquet, Senna, and I always there knocking the door, but, you know, it's always a step behind. And I knew why all the time, because I didn't have the opportunity to show my potential, and so this now, you know, is a relief in a way that I have this opportunity, and all my life that I work for that I you know, the hard times that I had, the years with no ride, looking for a sponsor and so on, is paying off, and I hope this can be a snowball that keep getting bigger and bigger.
The indication, of course, was that they would have gone green on that last lap, but now they've decided they needed a lap more to get the track fully clear.
His closest moment of stardom came when he won the World Sports Car Championship for Jaguar in the late 1980s.
So now he begins to pick the pace up, looking for the 4th turn, looking for the green flag. And finally it comes. The green flag waves at the start-finish line. Boesel leads the field back, and they come single file with Paul Tracy trying to make a move to the inside of Gordon. Now that's just the oil dry that was laid down on the track as a result of Johansson's accident. Not a problem, that puff of what looked like smoke. Not a problem with the car.
Very exciting racing between these two young tigers, Tracy and Gordon, both 24 years old and very, very eager.
Ongoing battle for 4th place as Tracy closes down on the back end of Gordon. At the front of the field, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd are stretched out even. Here is the fight. Tracy looking for maneuvering room to the inside. Can't close on Gordon at this point, but they are closing down on Scott Goodyear, riding in third.
Remember at Phoenix, a similar kind of situation. Both these young men had brilliant drives, but they both wound up in the wall.
You don't see an awful lot of passing going on right now, Paul, and the reason for this is the guys are feeling their cars out. They're all full of fuel. They've got 40 gallons of fuel on board, and they're feeling things out, and they're also looking to see what the other drivers are doing and how their cars are acting.
How much of it do you think, too, though, Bobby, is Jack's precaution that they are very concerned about tire wear here today?
Well, they're really not taking care of their tires right now, and the drivers are just not going to worry about that. They realize it's going to happen, but what they do in place of that is hope that there's a yellow every now and then, because that really saves their mileage on the tires.
Fastest lap thus far, 153 miles an hour, set by Raul Boisel. Let's get an update on him from Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, Bobby Unser talked about how rough this racetrack is and how many grooves there are. Right now, Raul Boisel says his car has a little bit of understeer. He's not at all concerned about it, though, because he feels as the fuel load begins to diminish, the understeer will take the car to what's known as neutral. He's very happy with it right now.
24 miles complete, and already Raul has caught up with the back of the field and has to thread his way through traffic as he comes around Hiro Matsushita.
You know, possibly, as Jack was talking about the fuel loads, just so that people know, the fuel goes right behind the driver. 40 gallons right behind the driver, between him and the engine, which is also behind him. So that theoretically, the fuel load shouldn't change the car's handling. But of course it does to a minute degree.
Boisel enjoyed that tremendous, almost 5-mile-an-hour advantage over the field at the beginning of the race, and he's once again establishing that advantage now that the race is going on. Most of it comes from his ability to go so fast into the turns. He's not that much faster off the turns, but he dives into them.
Moving through traffic now, Robbie Gordon cuts his way through, as does Paul Tracy. Mario Andretti just behind them, as traffic is the big effect on this particular run, as with most miles. How the leaders come up and overhaul those slower cars is absolutely critical. It requires a certain amount of pacing, Bobby.
Well, it certainly does, and they realize that, hey, this is a 200-lap race, not a race to the first pit stop. The trick, like guys like Robbie Gordon on the left and, of course, Paul Tracy, which is on the right of the screen, the idea is that they don't want to get a lap down. They're pacing themselves now. They're not flat out, but they're definitely not going to get caught too far behind.
Battle for sixth place. Nigel Mansell, you ride with him. Mario Andretti, his teammate, is just in front. And Nigel's looking for any room that he can to get around him, and there he goes. Moving to the inside, darting down, coming in the first turn. Mario's not having any of it.
As they go into the first turn like that, you can see there's a wall over there. So you got to be kind of careful if you're on the outside, that you don't pinch the guy off on the inside into the wall.
Nigel again making a bid, but shut down by Mario, who has won this race 4 times. He's the only multiple winner in the race. Al Unser Jr. has won it once. Otherwise, there are no previous winners other than those 2 men in the race.
On the home stretch, Nigel continues to chase Mario Andretti. Look at his hands. You can see how really rough this track is. When you see that onboard camera, you can see the suspension bounce.
There's cold winters here in Wisconsin and Milwaukee. If everybody's wondering why the track, look at all the patches on it. Those are patches with the track people trying to keep it good, but it's the cold winters that gets it here.
This is the same high line that we saw Nigel Mansell using at Indianapolis. Notice he's way outside of Mario in the turn. He wound up in the wall briefly at Indianapolis, bounced right off the turn 2 wall, but so far he's in good shape here.
Fight continues, a fight for sixth place. It's static at the front. Nigel still working on Mario.
Watch Nigel working high and Mario working low. Now, what he's doing is he's trying to plan a pass. He's faking Mario. The traffic, like right there, ruined the pass for him. But he's faking it. Look at him going by the outside. That's what he's been planning right down there before. If he can suck Mario down, he goes by the outside, which he just did.
Bobby, he looks like an old veteran oval racer, doesn't he, running that high line?
He does, Sam.
So Nigel puts the move on Mario Andretti. Mario, who won his first oval race here on the Milwaukee Mile, and now begins to pull away. So Mansell solidly in 6th place.
When he pulls away from Mario like this, Paul, that's an indication of what dirty air does, or the air that's disturbed behind him. You saw that he had a hard time passing Mario, but as he gets by Mario, he just pulls away like with these.
So back to the front of the field. This is the fight between the leader, Raul Boisel, and 2nd place, Emerson Fittipaldi. And Emerson is closing down.
He's closing down fast. Now watch him. He'll be working and faking Boisel, just like Mansell was doing Mario. He'll be looking for both L's. He's close enough now to see where his weaknesses are.
And Bobby, Emerson is running a high line the way Mansell did too. That would seem to be very effective at this point.
Looking back from Arie Luyendyk's car as the leader, Raul Boisel, comes around, and Fittipaldi comes right up to the inside. Looks like they're going to try and split Arie. They do. Who gets the best line into the corner? It's Fittipaldi for the moment. But Boisel sweeps around the outside, and there comes Goodyear, too.
Boy, that showed you that there's a groove on the outside of this racetrack. They were 3 abreast in there for a little while, some of the cars.
So change in several positions at the top of the order. Scott Goodyear taking advantage of that positioning. As he moved to the outside, so did Boisel. Fittipaldi forced down low, and as a result, dropped back 2 positions, now runs in 3rd.
This is the kind of explosive change of emphasis that can happen on this track. Emerson Fittipaldi, menacing for the lead, is suddenly dropped back to 3rd and is being hunted down himself by Robbie Gordon.
Raul Boisel at the front of the field has led now with his run thus far, more laps, 19 laps. That's more than he's led in his entire career, and he's doing it here today. But chasing him, we talk about the changing face of IndyCar racing. There's Scott Goodyear looking for his 2nd win. He sat on the pole at the Phoenix race and desperately would like to see his scorecard climb higher and higher.
As you watch the cars going around, realize that the racetrack is getting the oil, the water, whatever it is that they're going to leak early on the track. Makes the track slippery in places. Sometimes you'll see some of the guys get down really close to the grass, and you'll see another guy trying to pass him get way to the outside, the top of the groove, we call it. And it's all because the track's getting slippery.
This is a real test of the nerves of Raul Boisel. He was able to pull away earlier. He might have thought he had an easy race coming up. Now one driver after another is taking a shot at him. Will he let him by? Can he hang on to the lead? It's very tough because right now I don't believe he has the fastest car on the track.
Now it's a 3-way fight at the front as Fittipaldi closes in once again, and there is traffic again, lying just ahead of Raul. Goodyear looks to a little higher line. Fittipaldi is able to close on the approach to the corner.
You hate it when you're leading a race the way Boisel. Look at this, Emerson
Fittipaldi tries his move down inside. Goodyear slams the door on him.
You hate it when you're leading a race and you see traffic up ahead of you because you know you may have to back off for a second, and the men who are behind you may be able to anticipate what's going on and surge by you.
One of the things that you saw right there with Emma going under Goodyear, he comes off the turns faster. And the idea there is to pass him down the straightaway, but he already told Goodyear where he wanted to pass because he wasn't able to get by. Now Goodyear is going into the turns a little harder and a little deeper right there because he thinks that's where Emma thinks he's going to get him, Paul.
Goodyear sitting right up on the back end of Raul Boisel as Boisel
here it is
looking for racing room, and this is where Goodyear can get him, but he might get trapped. Indeed he does. Now he's forced outside. In fact, really has to come out of the throttle there, and that allows Fittipaldi to close in.
Boisel is playing this traffic brilliantly.
At 50 cars, Dave Coudrave, as we take a look at Paul Tracy, who continues his battle with Robbie Gordon, and Tracy is now in 4th place. Coudrave wisely moves to the inside because here comes the rest of the field as they come streaming past, and Paul Tracy is on the back end of his teammate's car. That's Fittipaldi just ahead. Coudrave stays down low. Very wise move as the fight continues at the front, and Scott Goodyear tries Raul again.
That's kind of hard on Boisel right there because he's got to look at that traffic way down the road. Just imagine that you're in his seat. He's got to figure out where all those lap cars are going to go. In the meantime, he's got that vulture called Scott Goodyear right behind him.
And remember, too, that some, like Coudrave, can get out of the way. Others are in a battle for their own and have no interest in getting out of the way for the leader. And look at Fittipaldi as he comes down, tries to get Goodyear again.
Yeah, and the line you want to take defensively is a shallow line, a tight line, to make the other guy go around you. But the high line is the fast line right now. So you really, if you're leading this race, you're not sure which line to use some of the time.
The leaders stay in touch as they come around Jimmy Vasser.
A perfect example of what you said, Paul, is a man may be fighting his own race. Is Teo Fabi in the yellow car that they're coming up on right now. The leaders are closing on Fabi. He's about to be lapped for the first time, but he's running well up and has no intention of just giving way.
And Fabi actually locked in a battle with the 11 car.
There it is.
There it is. And Scott Goodyear comes around. Fabi's locked in a battle. He's trying to catch Adrian Fernandez just ahead of him. But Goodyear now picks up the lead of the race. Boisel goes back to second, and now Fittipaldi closes on Raul.
Now that just gives you an example of what traffic does. Boisel picked the wrong lane. Goodyear got on the outside of him, locked him in, couldn't move after that, and drove right on by.
Now the two Penske cars dueling it out.
Of course, familiarity with the other drivers is what really counts when you're in this position, knowing where you think they may go.
Fittipaldi in the number 4 car, Paul Tracy just behind in the number 12 car.
So Fittipaldi sits in third place. Boisel has dropped back to second, and Scott Goodyear has picked up the lead of the race for the first time today. There are 47 miles, 47 laps complete of the 200 lap scheduled distance here on the Milwaukee Mile. Back at the Miller Genuine Draft 200, Scott Goodyear is still the leader as we look at the interval leaderboard. Raul Boisel still in second, but notice that Paul Tracy has managed to get around his teammate Emerson Fittipaldi. He did that just a few laps ago. We can go back and take a look at that situation. As Emerson Fittipaldi and Paul Tracy were battling one another. Tracy had been trying him several times. They came onto the backside, side by side. Tracy looked for any opportunity he had, then darted past, catching Fittipaldi up behind the slower Hiro Matsushita, and got into third place. Let's get a further update on that situation, though, from Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, one of the problems that you have is you watch the race from pit road, you can't see the backstretch. That's not a problem for crew chief Derek Walker on Scott Goodyear's car. They have installed a monitor in their pit position, and they watch that pass. I asked Walker what was going to happen. Was the car pushing? Was it loose? He said, no, it's just fast. Listen, though, they are going to try and make this race on only 2 stops, making no changes in about 7 laps when they bring the car onto pit road.
Paul Tracy now moves on Raul Boisel, sticks the nose down under him. Boisel running in second place, won't have it at this point, but Tracy stays right there with him.
When Tracy switches on like this, he becomes one of the most aggressive men in auto racing anywhere in the world.
Look at that as Tracy just blows past him, but Boisel is not going to give it up. Boisel stays on the outside, continues to radius just outside of Tracy, but he doesn't have the power off of the corner.
You can just see that the groove is down low right now. Wearing the top powder, it's getting a little bit slippery right there. So the guys are heading to the bottom and going faster.
Fittipaldi is moving up to attack Boisel next. So Boisel, who led, of course, so much of the early going, is starting to fall back. Here comes Fittipaldi making a bid on Boisel.
Remember, too, the tactics of this race, though. You want to try and conserve fuel. Robbie Gordon closes in on the back of Fittipaldi. At the same time, here comes Nigel. Nigel moving to the inside of Gordon. Gordon tries to the outside of Fittipaldi. He hangs on the outside. Bobby, I thought you said it was slippery out there.
Well, it's slippery for some and not for the others, obviously.
Apparently not for Robbie. Now you're on board with Nigel Mansell. He has Fittipaldi just ahead. Looking ahead of that is Robbie Gordon.
Often, Paul, when guys are getting past, they come to life all of a sudden. A lot like Robbie Gordon was doing there. He's really come to life. And they take different lines through the turn than they've been normally taking. And they find out, hey, it's good. Now look at way out there that Nigel is. Now he's out there testing that right now to see if it's sticking.
Rick Mears and Roger Penske both watching from the pits. Mears now a driver consultant with his team.
Bobby's point is a really good one. When you're bottled up behind traffic, you can test a line to see what's going to work for you when you need it the most. As long as you're not in a position to gain places or time, you can experiment, and Nigel Mansell took full advantage of that opportunity.
So Nigel Mansell now is sailing forward through the field, still led by Scott Goodyear. Paul Tracy still in second. Then Boisel, then Robbie Gordon, then Nigel, then Fittipaldi, then Mario Andretti in 7th. In 8th is Scott Brayton. Bobby Rahal is in 9th, and his teammate Mike Groff is in 10th.
What do you think Nigel Mansell thinks of this race after a year in Formula One? He probably hasn't passed this many cars in an entire season as he has so far in this race.
Let's go down to the pits, Jackaroo.
And Paul, we're in the window for first pit stops, and it looks like they will be under green flag conditions. Remember, there will be a speed limit imposed both under caution and under green. Drivers will have to bring their cars down pit road at 80 miles an hour. All of the drivers are concerned about this, and with the tight racing we've seen, they'll have to keep their wits about them when they come in for service.
Well, Jack, the window is open, but wouldn't they, with the early yellow, want to run maybe as far as 68, 69, maybe even 70 laps?
Well, that is the conventional wisdom, but remember, everybody figures there will be more caution periods to come. They don't want to run the string too far, especially in the first series of pit stops.
Another thing to keep in mind is they all have onboard computers in the cars, so they really should know what their mileage is or how much fuel they have left in the car.
Scott Goodyear, the leader of the race for Derek Walker, still forced now to thread his way through traffic. There's traffic everywhere on this track. As we look back from Bobby Rahall's car, he runs again in 9th place, about to be overhauled by the leader.
When Goodyear led this race last year, he led 3 laps of the race. Those were the first laps that he had ever led in IndyCar competition. He went on to finish 8th that day.
You see Paul Tracy now closing in on Scott Goodyear as Canadians run first and second. Scott Goodyear was a driver instructor at racing school for Paul Tracy. Did he teach him everything, Bobby?
Just look at the difference in the grooves. I mean, Rahal is down clear at the bottom of the track. Goodyear's clear out at the top. And yes, he definitely did teach him something. No question about that, Paul.
And Paul Tracy heads into the pits. Let's go to Gary.
Indeed, Paul, we're at the back of the car. The camera view is from the front of the car as they look at routine service. Remember how dominant Tracy was at Phoenix. Roger Penske has been on the radio reminding him to take it nice and easy. Everything has looked good. We've got him in 14.5 seconds on his first stop.
Nice stop in and out for Paul Tracy. 66 laps. The distance that Tracy was able to run, as now we're watching Scott Goodyear. And for a moment, he appeared to be slowing on the backside.
Bobby almost slid off the racetrack. He got too far out into what we call the marbles. The car was letting loose. He was lucky that he didn't spin the car. He got outside of where we see the black is there. He tested her too high for a bit.
Well, how long will they carry this car? Again, this is a comparison of the engines. A Ford engine here, a Chevrolet. In Paul Tracy's car, the Fords, are they going to get a little more mileage out of it?
Well, you know, the Fords have been all year. We've been thinking that they get a little bit better mileage. Now, we won't know that until we watch. But Scott Goodyear is not pitted. He's still on the road. He's 69 laps coming around for 70 now, so he very well could be getting better mileage than the Chevrolets.
And Scott Goodyear, when Paul Tracy pulled off, finally developed a good interval of 11 seconds between his car and the second-place car of Robbie Gordon.
A great favorite of the Canadians who love to root for an underdog.
There's Raul Boisel in the pits. Let's go to Gary Gerald.
We watched Dick Simons through the disappointment of a week ago at Indianapolis, forgotten for the moment, as they get Boisel out in what looks to be a very fine stop.
Sorry, Sam, for the interruption. You were about to say.
Just that Goodyear is a great favorite of the Canadians who love to root for an underdog and perceive the other major Canadian, Paul Tracy, as something of a favorite because he drives for the Roger Penske team.
Notice the caution that Boisel showed as he came out of the pits. Probably still smarting somewhat from penalties last week. Came out very carefully, making sure he was watching that speed limit.
Also, when the tires are stickers, they're fast, but it takes just a bit to warm them up. About 1 lap makes the guy feel better.
On board with 3rd place, Nigel Mansell, as now we begin to run through the pit stops. 71 laps are complete by the leader, Scott Goodyear. He has not yet stopped. Emerson Fittipaldi comes into the pits. This is his first stop of the day. It comes on lap 71.
No chassis changes, Paul. Just tires and fuel so far.
What are they doing down on the right, actually the left front wing, the right corner of the screen?
Now they're doing the wing, that's for sure.
So now with some changes to the front, Fittipaldi should have a car handling exactly the way he wants it.
Yes, they were turning the wing up on it. I didn't see that one as quick as you did, but they were turning the wing up, which means he needs more bite on the front end, where Jackaroo has a little less oversteer.
So Fittipaldi has been in and out of the pits. So has Scott Brayton. Briard, Sullivan, they've all made their first stops. And we wait for the leader of the race, who has carried his car now to the 73rd mile, a tremendous distance.
Now, he's established the fact, beyond belief, that he's going to do a two-stop race, or Derek Walker has. But we would safely assume that he should be running out of fuel pretty quick, Paul.
In second place is Robbie Gordon, another Ford. Third place is a Ford, Nigel Mansell. Then Mario Andretti. Top 4 are Fords. And then Bobby Rahal now runs in 5th place.
Here he comes.
But here comes Scott Goodyear turning down toward the pit road. Again, he is very careful of the speed limit, and Jack Arute waits for him.
Paul, Scott Goodyear and Derek Walker and their team have committed to a two-stop race. As you watch the activity, direct your attention to the right rear of the car. They are putting a sticker tire on the right rear. They are concerned about it there. They're also going to make a small wing adjustment on the car. At least that was the talk before he pitted. But he is off and away. A good stop, but they are concerned about that right rear. In 13.3 seconds, they've completed the stop.
So as Scott Goodyear comes into the pits, Robbie Gordon inherited the lead. But now most of the lead of the race is forced into the pits. Bobby Rahal down across the bumps. And Matsushita alongside Rahal. Still running under the green. We've had only one yellow here today. Nigel Mansell comes into the pits. Remember, he had his problems at Indy. No problem here as he finds his pit without any difficulty whatsoever.
The idea is he's got to stop that car right where the guy's hand is. Boy, he did that right spot on, Paul.
So as Nigel Mansell makes his stop, A.J. Foyt's team is also laid out waiting for Robbie Gordon to come into the pits, and here he comes. Here's Gary.
We watch with the crew. A.J. Foyt up on the stand overseeing the operation. The reset fuel meter sign was briefly in place. Gordon goes for the fresh drink, a wipe of the visor. It'll be sticker tires. They're hoping that they can get a couple of extra laps wear out of brand new tires. Now Matsushita ducks in just in front of Gordon. Gordon off the jacks. He's back out in 16 seconds flat.
So as Robbie Gordon goes back into the fight, having not made a stop, Mike Groff inherits the lead. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC station. Back at the Miller Genuine Draft 200, Paul Tracy just a second ago was able to dart inside of Scott Goodyear and take over the lead of the race. Here's what it looked like as Goodyear, hampered by some slower traffic running just in front of him. Now watch as Goodyear comes off the corner. Paul Tracy looks for room, kind of fakes to the outside, and then sweeps down to the inside. Now Scott Goodyear is totally stuck.
Now Scott got caught with the traffic. You can see the yellow car bastards right in front of him, Paul, and that's what really happened. The guys here need to learn, and some of them really know it well. They have to look ahead, guess where the traffic is going to be, and go the other way, because otherwise you get locked in.
Raul Boisel, as he's involved in a fight with Nigel Mansell, and Mansell goes into third place around Boisel. All of the stops now, the first set of stops, have been complete, and all of those occurring under the green. We had an early yellow for the accident involving Stefan Johansson. That slowed the average speed down. It's at 114 miles an hour now, but it's been climbing steadily since we came back to the green flag after that early yellow.
In terms of the championship, Mansell is in terrific shape because the two men in front of him in the race right now are not factors in the championship. He is leading all the people that were his close pursuers in the championship.
We mentioned we take a look at the interval leaderboard. That's the interval on the right side behind the leader. Mike Groff led for a lap. His first ever lead in the Indy cars, and then he had to come into the pits and give up that lead to Scott Goodyear. Then Paul Tracy was able to get around Goodyear and pick up the lead. Let's go down to the pits to Jack Arute.
Paul, after seeing Raul Boisel run so fast in the early going, now this is a normal tire before it goes on in its scuffed condition. These are called the wear markers. This is the right rear tire that just came off of Raul Boisel's car. It is totally, I repeat, totally worn out. They have had to back out of the throttle out of concern of having tires left for the end of the race.
Well, that may explain why Raul appeared to slow down some laps ago. He ran the fastest lap of the race at 153 miles an hour. Let's look at Fittipaldi. With Boisel slowing down, Fittipaldi moves into fourth place around Raul. But Boisel in the last couple laps has fallen off a good 10 miles an hour. He's now averaging at 142 miles an hour the past couple laps.
The track changes, and as it changes, some of the guys get better, some of them get worse. Boisel is obviously not liking the way the track is changing through this car, Paul.
The two Brazilians who had been on the front row at the beginning and diced for the lead are now back in 5th and 6th.
At the front, Paul Tracy. Remember at Phoenix, Paul Tracy did so very well, leading and finally putting 2 laps on the entire field until a mistake on a pass put him into the wall and cost him the race. But then he came back at Long Beach to take the win.
Traffic is a big thing. If you watch Emmo come off the turn there with that car he was lapping, the big problem is that he was fast, he had the speed, but the guy was in his groove where he needed to be. Another thing, when the guys have to change grooves, it usually takes them about 1 turn to figure out whether the track is still good there or whether there's a little bit of oil or a little bit of marbles. That means the old rubber. The old rubber, incidentally, that comes off the tires is probably what makes the track the slipperiest if you get out of the groove.
Well, Paul Tracy and the rest fight a very rough track here. That's part of the challenge. At starting, Jack Arute suggested that the tires would be a critical story. They are becoming that now. But, Jack, why are the tires wearing more this year than in other years?
Well, actually, Paul, they aren't. One of the things that's happened, though, and is we have a problem on the front straightaway.
Black flag is out.
And it's Kudrave, the 50 car. Looked like the engine let go on the front stretch. That's you saw a puff of smoke at the back of the car, Jack, that I assume was oil coming out of the engine and onto the manifold.
And yes, and this is a break for everybody here on pit road, as they will be able to have the luxury of a pit stop to check this tire wear. Going back to answer your question, Paul, the tires are wearing out because of the fact that, as Gary Gerald alluded to at the beginning of the show, if you have a severe understeer problem, what will happen is you will scuff off and totally wear out the right front. If you have an oversteer or a loose condition, which a lot of cars have complained about, you will wear out the right rear. That's why Scott Goodyear elected to go with 1 sticker tire back in the right rear. They were concerned about wearing out that right rear. This is an old racetrack. It's scheduled to be repaved maybe in a couple of years. But right now, it's taking its toll on tires.
Well, David Kudrave had an engine let go. He climbed out of the car, no problem whatsoever, but you can see it sits in peril on the edge of the track. They also will want to send out the IndyCar safety crews and make sure that there's not oil down on the track surface. So the PPG pace car is out in front of the field now, and of course the front of the field is Paul Tracy, followed by Scott Goodyear, then Nigel Mansell, Emerson Fittipaldi, Raul Boesel, Robbie Gordon, and Mario Andretti. So our second yellow of the day, this time for David Kudrave, the first one for an accident involving Stefan Johansson. We'll be back with more right after this. Now, Mario Andretti has been in the pits twice in recent moments, Gary.
Yes, indeed, Paul. He came in for routine service. They changed the tires, fueled the car under the yellow, sent him out. He completed just 1 lap. They've come in, they've removed the cowling at the back of the car, turned the engine off. We can see that one of the springs apparently is loose, and the attention on the right rear side over the wall just away from our view. But they are trying to change or do something with the spring on that right rear side. This is a very costly stop, obviously, for Mario Andretti, who won the earlier mile competition this year at Phoenix.
Gary, it's costly for Mario's championship hopes, too. He was Nigel Mansell's closest pursuer at the beginning of the day. Now his problems will drop him back further, and of course Mansell is doing very, very well. Looks to extend his lead in the championship.
Robbie Gordon did come in the pits. They made a few adjustments to the car, and then he headed back out. Of course, anytime a car comes into the pits, they also top it off with fuel.
Yes, and if you don't lose a lap, it isn't quite as bad, except you go clear back to the serial scoring or back to the back of the line. It means you got a lot of cars to pass, but the slower cars compared to the faster cars, it's easy to pass here. Now here's what they're working on. There's the shock absorber tank, the little gold thing. That's the pressure cylinder for the shock absorbers. They're working on the spring. Something came loose back there. And Paul, I've never seen a spring come loose on a race car like that.
Let's remember the turbocharger is right underneath there. That's got a pretty good surface temperature.
It's all hot back there. In fact, the springs are set right up on top of the transmission. The shiny aluminum thing right on your left there is where the turbocharger inlet is.
This is when the mechanics show what incredible abilities they have. I mean, we know they're great mechanics, but when you can work this fast under pressure, when everything is as hot as you guys are talking about, it's really terrific.
And look at the care they show. That car has to go back together, ready for speed, so they can't make a mistake at all. And boy, they run for parts in the pits as they come back to the camera, and we come back to green flag racing. Paul Tracy, the leader. Scott Goodyear runs in second. In third, Nigel Mansell. There's Tracy on the backstretch.
Remember at Phoenix, Tracy had this kind of superiority, built a 2-lap lead, and crashed into Jimmy Vasser. Or rather, he crashed trying to pass Jimmy Vasser. Threw away a very big lead. I can imagine that Roger Penske is trying to calm him down. When I was Roger's junior driver many, many years ago, he would lean in the window to me but just before the race started and say, don't go berserk and don't get involved with anything. And I imagine he's saying much the same now, 30 years later, to this star.
Tracy is using a groove on the track right now, Paul. It's very similar to a qualifying groove. The track is basically settling in. It doesn't seem to be slippery in any spot. So Tracy's using, he's got clean air. He's got no traffic right now. Good qualifying groove.
Here's a race summary as we are just beyond the halfway point, 101 miles for this summary. We're actually at 102 now. And Scott Goodyear has been trying to handle up Roberto Guerrero so that he can get back in contact with Paul Tracy. But this has been very costly for Scott Goodyear because he's fallen about a half a second a lap behind while he continues to fight with Guerrero.
Tracy is making hay while the sun shines. When he's got a clean racetrack to run, he's really trying to put some distance between him and Scott Goodyear. There's Robbie Gordon in the black 14 car.
Robbie, who ducked into the pits, as we mentioned, got a little extra fuel, maybe a change to the suspension, now in pursuit of Raul Boesel. It is a fight for 5th place, and Robbie's closing in.
I can watch Boysel's car as he comes down the front straightaway. Now, we know it's a little bumpy. The pavement's not too level here, but watch Boysel's car, and it switches as he comes down the straightaway. We'll see it again pretty soon.
Robbie Gordon has been in the pits twice. Maybe has 3 or 4 laps ahead of the rest of the field in terms of fuel.
This is Emerson Fittipaldi on the left of the screen. Raul Boesel on the right. There's Fittipaldi, right now the second running Penske car. Behind, of course, Paul Tracy. Boesel moving in for the first time in several laps, more in an attack mode. He'd been falling back after he initially lost the lead.
The fight here is for 4th. Top of the order, Tracy, Goodyear, Mansell, and then this battle for 4th place between Fittipaldi and Boesel.
Boesel has recaptured the setup that he had earlier that made him superior. He's starting to move well again now on this high groove, right behind Emerson Fittipaldi.
Boesel moves to the outside while Robbie Gordon closes in as well. Jack, did they make some good changes on Boesel's car? It looks like it's working better.
And Paul, I'm very confused. I want to ask Bobby Unser. Normally, if you scuff off a right rear, I would think you'd want to stiffen the bars, the onboard adjustment you can make. But Dick Simon and crew have instructed Boesel to loosen the bars. They've gone to full loose, and it seems to have worked, Bobby.
Well, what's happening there, Jack, is it's called roll stiffness. They're loosening up the front and the rear bar together, letting the car lean over, theoretically getting a little bit more side bite. That's what they're chasing right now.
I stand corrected and educated.
And those are all adjustments that can be made in the cockpit. There are 2 little levers down at the driver's left hand that allows him to change the stiffness of the front anti-roll bar. We'd call it a sway bar in a passenger car, or the rear anti-roll bar, right?
Yes, and I think the most important thing for everybody to realize, Paul and Jack, is the track changes. So the race car has to be changed as we go along in the races. And that's the reason you see them. They didn't make mistakes at the start. They're just changing to match the track.
You talk about roughness, that's Danny Sullivan's steering wheel. That little white line marks the center of the wheel when the wheels are pointed straight for Danny. They do that so that he can bring it back in a line when they are coming into the pits. But look at how both Danny and the wheel bounces.
In the old days, before ground effect, a rough track like this meant very little. Today, because the springs are so stiff and the cars ride so low, all of the roughness of the track is transmitted right up to the driver. You can see how much Danny's helmet bounces around. It's a rough ride out there.
And for all of this bouncing around, the best that Danny is able to manage is 22nd position right now.
You know, Paul, sometimes people wonder why. Danny is a good driver. There's no question about that. But here's a car running 22nd position.
Goodyear, second place car.
There's an unexpected problem. Obviously, this is going to be a powertrain, probably an engine problem, because the car doesn't look bent from here.
Just all of a sudden, as we look down on the Walker Motorsports pit, and they look to try and determine what happened there.
Not a fuel problem. They were well inside of their window.
So a serious problem as the yellow comes out because of the precarious positioning of Scott Goodyear's car.
He's just sitting there getting mad, thinking about what just happened to him, just taking him out of competition.
So Scott Goodyear now talking to the safety team. Let's go to Jack Arute.
Well, Paul, checking in with Derek Walker, he had radioed in from Scott Goodyear. They think it may have been the transmission letting go.
As we saw him come off of speed on the front stretch and then down to the inside. No physical indication, and that would help you believe that it's transmission.
Yes, transmission or an engine, we guessed, and powertrain somewhere. What happens a lot of times with the transmissions here is where the track we talk about it being rough. When you see all the patches, it's because they have edges on them, and that's what gets the transmission. It's a sudden jar.
You see Nigel Mansell in the pits. He is now, of course, moved into second with Scott Goodyear's demise.
So the yellow's out while they try and get Scott Goodyear's car. There you got a glimpse of it sitting down in the first corner off of the track and back into the pit area, though it doesn't seem that there's anything they can do for a broken transmission in the short time that they will have here. 114 laps are complete in the Miller Genuine Draft 200. Back at the Miller Genuine Draft 200 on the Milwaukee Mile, there's the leader. The 14, the number belongs to A.J. Foyt. But he's given it to rookie Robbie Gordon, who is the leader of this race at the moment, and comes up looking for the best position he can to be ready for the restart. Let's go to Gary Gerald.
Well, Robbie Gordon still has a pit stop to take. Now, into this yellow, Paul Tracy came in, got the routine service, lap 117. That means he's not going to be able to go the distance. He'll have to make another stop. But the thing they like in the Penske camp is that the car is in perfect shape. Let us also update Mario Andretti. They had changed the entire rear shock and spring units. It was a six-man job that took several minutes, but Mario is back on the course. Let's go to Jack.
And to run so well and so strong, and now Scott Goodyear, you're out. What put you out?
Well, we think it's something to do with the driveline, transmission, or what have you. It's a shame. McKenzie car ran well. I was happy all day. Second set of tires was on there, just backed us up. They weren't working very well.
About tires, Scott, everybody seems to be having some problems. What's the concern?
Well, this morning, those first set of tires we started on were perfect. The second set, we knew we had a problem with. They're a lot slower than we anticipated. So third set, we're good. We wanted to go racing with a third set.
Paul?
And on the track itself, Fittipaldi, Paul Tracy, and Nigel Mansell all charging on the leader of the race, Robbie Gordon, as he works his way through traffic. Tracy moved up into second place. And now Tracy in second is charging alongside of Gordon. And Tracy sticks his nose in front. Paul Tracy back to the front.
Now remember, the difference that we have right now is Robbie Gordon right there in the black car is the only one that didn't pit of the fast cars during this last yellow. They're still going. Foyt has decided to go for a two-stop race on that thing. He's the only one. Everybody else that's fast is going to have to make a third stop.
Tracy has led more laps this year than any other driver, and you can see why. He has a very aggressive style, and he likes to get to the front.
So Paul Tracy takes the lead away from Robbie Gordon, while at the same time Mario Andretti peeled off and headed back into the pits. Apparently whatever work they've done on that car has not been satisfactory. So the top of the order is Tracy, Gordon, then Raul Boisel, and then Nigel Mansell forced back into fourth place now, followed by Emerson Fittipaldi. But look at Tracy as he has to handle up traffic. He comes up on the back end of Al Unser Jr.'s car now.
Yes, and he's working hard. Remember, Tracy has got another pit stop to make, but he's got fresh tires. He should be able to go real fast right now, Paul.
That fresh tires, that was the difference when he passed Gordon so quickly. Don't you believe, Bobby?
Oh, absolutely, no question about that. Fresh tires right now in the Milwaukee Mile is the hot ticket.
Paul Tracy puts 8th place Al Unser Jr. a lap down now, as Boisel closes on Robbie Gordon and Fittipaldi closes on Nigel Mansell. We'll keep an eye on this battle. Battle for fourth, Mansell, Fittipaldi.
car, he looks right back at Emil. That's what he sees in his mirror when he looks back, Paul.
But what matters is what's in front, and it's slower traffic. Mansell has to pick his way through it. Fittipaldi is looking for a line. Mansell gets down low. Fittipaldi decides that works for him. He's going to try it as well.
Some days the drivers pick that traffic good. Milwaukee's probably the best example of where you can either be famous for saying, boy, you really worked the traffic good today. Sometimes you work it bad. Often I think it's a lot like going to Las Vegas and gambling.
But I'll tell you this, there's more traffic this year than in the past because so many cars started the race that were mechanically very sound. And there are more cars running now, just as we saw last week at Indy, than you would expect. A lot of traffic as you see Emerson taking a look at Nigel Mansell.
Still 22 cars in the run, only 3 out. Goodyear with the transmission, Kudrave with the engine, and Johansson with his accident.
This is the first time that Mansell has really been under attack. He has been the man moving up, but of course Fittipaldi appears to have a good setup for this stage of the race right now.
127 miles now complete. Nigel Mansell runs in fourth.
And right behind the rookie, Adrian Fernandez, racing for the Gallus team. Did a wonderful show here last year, but he is not experienced on the track, and I think you'll see, I hope you'll see him get out of the way and let the battle continue.
Fernandez has been the fastest of the 3 Gallus cars all during practice and qualifying, Jim. He's from Mexico. He's the only driver that we have in the race from Mexico.
Fernandez currently runs in 9th place. The view backwards again from Mansell's car. Leader of the race is still Paul Tracy. He is not in contest with anyone. Robbie Gordon runs 2 seconds back in 2nd place. Then Borsell, then Mansell, then Fittipaldi. Still all of those cars well within attacking distance of the lead.
You can see when Mansell comes out of the turn, he looks at Fernandez and another car, both of them in different groups, and he says, where am I going to go?
The other car is Ari Luyendyk. You see the red car on the left of the screen there. Of course, Ari finished 2nd last week at Indianapolis. Up until that point in the season, Ari had a miserable year, and he's going right back to having a miserable year right here. He's not doing well at all.
Fittipaldi now alongside Adrian Fernandez. Makes that pass, continues his pursuit, looking for room alongside Luyendyk. So Nigel Mansell, you ride with him. He runs in 4th. Paul Tracy still leads Robbie Gordon. We'll be back with the Miller Genuine Draft 200 after this message and a word from our ABC station. 36 miles complete in the Miller Genuine Draft 200. Paul Tracy is out in front. He got to this position with a tremendous set of passes. Now look back in the field as Paul Tracy makes first his move on Nigel Mansell. Sweeps around Mansell very much like Mansell swept around in the first turn in Indianapolis last week. And then Tracy sets his sights on that black number 14 of Robbie Gordon. Using traffic, both of them go to the inside. Tracy looks for high side room, traps Gordon behind the slower car, and Paul Tracy picks up the lead of the race just that quickly. A nice set of passes.
The great drivers pass. I know that's an obvious oversimplification, but it's why Michael Andretti was hired by Team McLaren. They have an instinct for getting by people and getting by them in a hurry, and that was a beautiful example of Paul Tracy's passing.
And Gary Gerald, Paul Tracy is having a magnificent day thus far.
Paul, I'll tell you, it's amazing because perhaps the most unhappy driver in the morning warm-up half-hour session was Paul Tracy. He didn't like the way the car was going. They were calculating on some changes they were going to make, knowing there was some risk. Apparently, if it was a gamble, that gamble has really paid off handsomely because he was not happy at the end of that morning warm-up session. Now he's doing a terrific job.
And a lot of that, Paul, is because they put new tires on that car. The Milwaukee track really loves new tires. Anytime a track gets a lot of weather on it, it gets rocks that are sticking up in the track instead of smooth pavement. You can't see it on the camera, but it's just little tiny rocks. And the thicker the tires are, the more the rubber wraps around those little rocks.
Al Unser Jr. now as he charges on Scott Brayton. This is a battle for 7th place, currently occupied by Brayton. But little Al, whoop, and that's Fernandez against the wall. Yellow comes out again. We were talking about little Al, and this is his teammate. But what is that in front? What is that piece laying out on the track?
That should be part of the body on the left.
Several other cars. The 19 car, that's the MyJack machine, Luyendyk.
One of
There's the view from Ari. Several cars getting together.
can see that one of the Penske cars is involved, and it looks like Paul Tracy stepping out.
Tracy again.
Tracy again involved in an accident.
And Robbie Gordon misses his pit. He cut in a little too hard. Let's go to Jack.
And Paulie was so worried about speeding that he missed his pit. They had to back the car up. The reason they have to do that, as you can see, the fuel hoses won't fit. A.J. Foyt looked it over, cracked a smile, though, because they're extremely pleased with how the car is running. They're going to exchange 4 tires, and the original wisdom was going to be they were going to go with stickers. They've decided to go back to the scuffs. A.J.'s very happy with the run so far by his young protege, Robbie Gordon.
So Robbie Gordon gets his stop finally made. Here's what brought out the yellow. Fernandez spins.
Fernandez, who had been doing such a beautiful job up until then.
He's against the wall. Now, apparently, everything else happened down below Fernandez. It's the first time that we're seeing it. Here's Arie Luyendyk's view, Bobby.
Well, Arie's going into turn 1. There's Ray Hall off to the left in front of him there. He got hit from behind. Obviously, somebody hit him. If it didn't hit him, which is what I'm sure happened, and something broke furiously on the car, but I think he got hit, Paul.
Well, you could see from that view that Hernandez's car was also against the wall, so apparently he was climbing out of the throttle and then got nailed from behind. We'll try to clarify this a little more, but it's taken out Luyendyk. It's also taken out the leader of the race, Paul Tracy, and given the lead over to Raul Boesel under the yellow. We'll be back. Roger Penske in the uncomfortable position of having his car with Paul Tracy at the wheel in the lead and in an accident. The accident started with Adrian Fernandez, who spun quickly and got into the wall, but then it appeared, and we'll try and get some visuals here to support this, but it appeared as we watch Paul Tracy and Arie Luyendyk heading back, wondering no doubt exactly how this all occurred. But it appeared that Luyendyk saw the accident ahead. You see the accident happening, and at the same time he got hit from behind. Now, logically, that is Paul Tracy that hit him, because Tracy was following closely behind Luyendyk, and that took him to the wall. Here you see, there they are. There's Luyendyk, and Paul Tracy is tucked right into his side. So things happen fast on a bull ring, and this happened very fast as well.
This is a very different kind of accident for Paul Tracy than the one at Phoenix. This was a chain reaction thing. The Phoenix one was a judgment error. This is different.
Let's go down to Jack Arute.
Well, you talk about how quick things can happen on a 1-mile bull ring. They happen fast on pit road as well. When that caution came out, the Robbie Gordon car was pulling onto the pit road. He overshot his pits. A.J. Foyt was on the radio yelling to his crew, go around, go around. They misunderstood exactly what he was saying, so they backed him up. He went a lap down. What A.J.'s doing now is talking it over with his crew, and believe it or not, that's the calmest I've ever seen A.J. Foyt. He was a little hotter before, but he's trying to explain, as a former driver, what you need to do now that he's an owner. Let's check in with Gary Gerald. Gary?
Well, Jack, it's interesting. Boesel has stayed on the track. We assumed that he'd still have to make a splash and go or hope for another yellow. That's not the case, according to Dick Simon. They've made 2 stops. He says, we think we've got enough laps here under yellow. It's going to be a squeaker, but we think we can go the distance. Everybody else among the leaders has come in under the yellow to get the necessary fuel. We know they're good. The question now, is Raul Boesel going to be good enough to make it to the lap 200?
Well, there's some guts. Dick Simon looking at his first possible win and looking at running all the way to the finish on his current load of fuel. Raul Boesel is in front in the Miller Genuine Draft 200. Nigel Mansell is just behind him. We'll be back for the restart right after this message. Mile still under the caution for the multiple car accident. Nobody injured, involving Adrian Fernandez, Arie Luyendyk, and the leader of the race, Paul Tracy. Look at this. The #1 car, we mentioned him right at the top of the race, Bobby Rahal, now runs in 4th place. He's played the traffic very well and sits in a great position.
He's often said that when he is embarrassed, as he was, of course, at Indy last week, he rebounds incredibly strongly. Remember, last year he spun out at Portland, which was the race before Milwaukee. He had a bad finish at Portland. He came back and finished 2nd here.
So now as the pace begins to pick up, and we'll be coming back to a green flag again, keeping an eye on Raul Boesel, and look at the lead that he got coming off of the corner. And there is Nigel Mansell as he comes down inside Robbie Gordon. Gordon, remember, is a lap down. Mansell runs in second place. And Mansell has traffic to deal with. Fittipaldi is just back behind Mansell in third place.
Now, Boycell is leading right now, Paul, but let's just keep one thing in mind as we watch it. He has not stopped for fuel. He's going to be very close on fuel. The biggest problem is going to be that he doesn't have enough tires to be really quick at the very end. That, in my opinion, is his main problem.
Mansell is driving exactly the kind of race he raced at Indianapolis last week, which was cautious in one sense and yet aggressive in another. And once again, he's worked up from an indifferent starting position to a commanding situation in the race.
Keeping an eye on the second place car, Nigel Mansell, the red number 5. Remember, this man is still not fully recovered from that incident at Phoenix, despite the fact that he drove the Indianapolis 500 last week. Still a very sore back, but it almost seems like pain drives this man to even faster laps.
It is an incredible thing to watch Nigel Mansell absorb all of IndyCar racing the way he has. I mean, he has never driven on these ovals before, and yet he is competitive right away. He's never made this kind of pit stop, and yet he has grasped the strategy. He's racing against a whole bunch of drivers he never even heard of until the beginning of this year, and yet he's handling them beautifully.
Not only is he particularly bright about all of this, he is very keen to do it. There is one of his two car owners, Carl Haas, keeping track of his car. Mansell seems to be truly enjoying himself. We've said that before, but this entire year, a great smile. He likes the guys he's hanging with. This morning, he was down joking with A.J. Foyt just before the start.
You know, it doesn't make any difference how you look at it. When you're on board with him right now with the camera, as a racing driver, you can say, hey, the guy's at the right place on the racetrack all of the time. He makes very few mistakes. I've never seen a rookie in my life that's gained as fast as he has in IndyCar racing.
And remember, he's driving an entirely different kind of car than he was driving in Formula One last year, that Williams with the automatic suspension, the automatic gearbox.
And Mike Groff slows down on the course and slows down in a place that may bring out yet another yellow. They were running static at the front of the field. As we watch Mike, let's go to Gary Gerald. Gary, you have an update?
An update on Bobby Rahal, not aware of the problem with Groff, but Rahal has a problem as well. His car is stuck in 5th gear, and so he has to stay in that gear. If he were have to pit under yellow, he'd have a major problem. So there is apparently a gremlin on the first time out of the box for this brand new Lola.
Well, if Groff's yellow brings out, if Groff's problems bring out a yellow, that's going to really hurt Rahal. Wouldn't that be ironic?
Bobby Rahal stuck in 5th gear. How will that affect his run here? Aren't the top 2 gears good for him?
Well, the problem is
there's a stop-and-go penalty for Scott Brayton for passing Rahal just before they came back to the grid.
And you know why he did? Because Rahal was stuck in 5th gear, and I saw him waving Brayton by, actually. Yellow.
You know, that's one of the things that the officials can't know. That's going to be a mistake on Scott Brayton, but they didn't know that. There's no way to know it. But what's going to happen now with Rahal is he's stuck in the 5th gear. He can't put it in the 4th. He can't put it in the neutral. He's going to have to start the race in 5th, and that's hard.
And as you can tell, the yellow has come out because of Mike Groff's car on the circuit. That slows the field once again, closes them up. Raul Boesel is still the leader. Nigel Mansell is second. Fittipaldi is in 3rd. And 4th place is still Bobby Rahal, despite his problem with 5th and 6th gear. We'll be back. You ride with Nigel Mansell. He runs in 2nd place. Now about 2 seconds behind the leader of the race, Raul Boesel. If Boesel can score a victory here today, it would be not only his first IndyCar win, but the first for Dick Simon, either as an owner or as a car owner. Their best finish came last year at Detroit, when Boesel finished in 2nd place.
Only 35 laps left. Boesel has got tires to worry about and fuel to worry about. But, of course, this last yellow flag is really going to help him on the fuel and, of course, on his tires, too.
Let's go down pit side. Jack Arute is with Paul Tracy after that accident.
Paul, first of all, what happened?
Well, I was just running around in a smooth pace when we were leading there, and a guy crashed coming out of 2, and I was with a pack of cars, and I was on the inside, and one of the other cars moved over and just collected into the side of me. So, nowhere.
It seems like it continues to happen. You seem to be snake bit. You can run so fast, be out in the front, and then someone gets into trouble in front of you.
Well, it's disappointing for what happened, but, we know the car's running really well, and we'll be back at Detroit. I went good there last year. We're looking for some points for next week.
And Paul, talking about the battle out on the racetrack, they have radioed to Nigel Mansell that the crew, Jim McGee and the crew, feel that maybe Bozell has a little more fuel, but they feel they are faster than Bozell.
Well, Bozell has been running laps at 150 miles an hour. That's 3 miles an hour off of his pace set early in the race, but of course the track has changed substantially. He is still setting the fastest laps on the track at this moment. Next Sunday, ABC Sports kicks off with our first look at the United States World Cup team in action. They'll meet defending World Cup champion Germany in the U.S. Cup 93. Live action begins at 1 o'clock Eastern. And then we'll be in Michigan as these IndyCars are once again performing, this time on the streets of Detroit for the ITT Automotive Detroit Grand Prix. That's all next Sunday here on ABC Sports.
At the beginning, we spoke of Bozell's anger and frustration because of Indianapolis and the 2 penalties there. Obviously, he and this team have used that anger to focus on this race. You see him moving past Hiro Matsushita there, and they are doing brilliantly. Robbie Gordon moving now on the outside.
Robbie trying to get that lap back. Remember, he runs a lap down, runs in 5th place.
Well, he got it back. Now it puts Robbie technically on the same lap as Rob Bozell, but remember, he's got to come all the way around. A yellow flag right now would bring Robbie around in the back of the field, or too close.
So at the front of the field, it's still Raul Boesel. Nobody in contest with him at the moment, though. Here comes Mansell trying to close in with Boesel. So Mansell now closes in and is just 100 feet or so off the back. Look at Boesel as he threads his way through traffic. He
Only about 30 laps left, so the pressure is starting to come on. Mansell feels it. The guys are telling him by radio, hey, you got 30 laps left, you better hook him up.
Boesel pulls away, puts some distance between he and Nigel Mansell right now. Fittipaldi is 3rd. Rahal is 4th. Robbie Gordon back on the leader's lap is in 5th place. Now, time constraints are going to send us off the air here in just a few seconds, but we will be coming back for the finish of this race. We'll go away to golf. We will come back and give you the finish. The race with the Civil Yellows has just run a little overtime. We're going to get coverage of both the golf and of the IndyCars for you. Nigel Mansell runs in 2nd. He is not at this moment in contest with the leader, Raul Boesel, nor is anyone in contest with Mansell. They are all static at the front of the field, and these 5 cars down through Robbie Gordon run in the top 5 positions. So we'll be leaving you, but for a very short time. Stay with us. We'll be going to the golf and then back to the Milwaukee Mile for the conclusion of the Miller Genuine Draft 200 with Raul Boesel currently in front. Mansell is in front of the field. Raul Boesel is in 2nd place. It happened very quickly, just a few seconds ago. Mansell was just behind, closing, slower traffic. Teo Fabi sitting ahead. They came down alongside of Sullivan. And then suddenly we're able to make a move to the inside. Look at Mansell as he dials down inside Boesel. Boesel's tires are a problem. Another view of the same situation. Nigel Mansell looking for racing room and found it down low on the track and just simply cruised by.
And you can see Boesel slipped. His tires are worn. He slipped out. He got in the marbles. Mansell, on the other hand, was hooked up down low with a lot better tires.
Mansell, now the question is, will he conserve his tires and his fuel in the run to the finish? He, in Formula One, has been typically very aggressive, racing hard to the end, regardless of what kind of a lead he had here. He's starting to, I think, cool it a little bit. Very sensibly with his eye on the championship, which, of course, he will enormously increase his lead in the championship if he is able to ride this out and win it.
We are just 8 short laps from the finish of this race. We'll be going back to the Memorial just as soon as this race is done. But Nigel Mansell is on his way to making history. That is, if he can keep that number 9 car, Raul Boesel, off of his back.
Just look how close they are. There's only 1 car between Boesel and bottom.
And Boesel's got him as Mansell comes down way low, has to get out of the throttle and slows.
Mansell's car is getting
Fittipaldi. Fittipaldi is charging on Mansell now.
No, I think that was Andretti that they swept by.
And Robbie Gordon catches the wall. Robbie Gordon catches the wall. That will bring out the yellow. Yellow flag flies. We slow here at Milwaukee.
Lap 194, Paul.
And as they came across the line, Bosell was ahead of Nigel Mansell, and Gordon gestures to the photographers and safety workers. I have no idea what happened.
I believe that it was Andretti that Mansell was passing, Paul. And I think Mansell is still running okay, as we see Robbie Gordon obviously okay after his brush with the wall.
With his movements, he's trying to explain to everybody that it wasn't him, it was the car. But I don't know that everybody's going to understand that.
You're absolutely right, though, Sam. There is Mansell, scored at the lead of the race. That was Andretti moving low. And Boisel is in second place still, but they will come back in contact with one another. Paul Newman and Carl Haas discussing the situation now and how they will keep their car in front, though he has been running laps faster than the second place car, that 9 car of Raul Boisel.
Dick Simon there. He started his racing career in IndyCars back in 1970. He owned and drove his own cars until he retired in 1988, and that's when he began to focus on being a car owner, and he has been coming on and on and on.
You know, one of the things that makes it awfully hard on us sometimes, 2 cars looking like Mansell's and Mario's. Boy, we thought when he's passing Mario that was Mansell. Really would have changed the race under those conditions.
So behind the PPG pace car now, Nigel Mansell. The only difference in the car, beside the number, which is very difficult to see, is the red roll bar on Mario Andretti's car. We have 4 laps to go to the finish, and we'll see if they're going to get Robbie Gordon's car totally clear, possibly a 2-lap dash.
This race could end under the yellow, but it seems highly unlikely. I think we will see a 2-lap dash.
We look down through the entire field right now. After 196 laps, we're just completing 197 right now. Mansell slaps it down, looks for a lower gear. And they say they will go back to green at the conclusion of this lap. The safety crews, the IndyCar safety crews, are rushing to their positions at the side of the track so they can clear the course.
All right, remember, we're looking at 2 very highly motivated drivers in Mansell and Raul Boisel. Both men ran brilliantly at Indy last week into 3rd and 4th, respectively. It's Boisel in the orange car. Danny Sullivan sits in between them. He's been slow in this race. There's Mansell. Both men out of Formula One and now into IndyCars.
And remember, Nigel Mansell had a problem coming back to the green flag a week ago at Indianapolis.
And again, he's slow, Paul, as he comes up to the green.
As Boisel looks for room wherever he can. Nigel Mansell holding him off. If Nigel can win here today, he would be the first foreign driver to win at this track since Jimmy Clark in 1963. The same, of course, would be true for Raul Boisel. The 2 of them separated now by just a few feet.
Were the race to end this way, Mansell would have a whopping 70 championship points, and Boisel would move into second with 52.
Nigel Mansell takes a look at the white flag. He sends himself down the back straightaway. 1 straightaway to go now on the backside. Nigel Mansell taking a look down inside of turn number 3, and Mansell can sense that checkered flag ahead. Boisel tries to close in. He can't get the job done, and Nigel Mansell picks up the win. Nigel Mansell's first win on an oval, and he continues his point lead. Congratulations to Newman Haas in second place. Boisel. Fittipaldi is in 3rd. Bobby Rahal with a 4th place finish. Al Unser Jr. up to 5th. And Scott Brayton comes home in 6th place. So the race has been run at Milwaukee. The Miller Genuine Draft 200 won by Mansell. Let's go back to the memorial.